Welcome to Insights in Action with Orange 142, where we interview agency leaders and business owners to uncover the journeys, strategies, and insights that drive their success. At Orange 142, we're all about transforming brand stories into impactful digital experiences through innovative media and marketing solutions. And today, I am very lucky to be joined by Alexandra of Arro Financial Communications. How's it going, Alexandra?
Hi, Shiv. Thank you so much for having me. Doing well, thanks.
Awesome. Alexandra, I was on the website, really cool looking website, nice, bright. I'd love to just start this off by learning a little bit more about yourself, your background, and a little bit more about Arrow.
Yeah, absolutely. So, Arrow is a full service marketing and public relations agency, and we specialize in the financial services space. And that's really because my background, and I started the agency about 11 years ago, my background has been in the financial communication space. I've worked at agencies, I've worked in house, and I saw a real need about 11 years ago for there to be a firm that caters to the asset management space, which is essentially working with firms who either manage or release investment products. And it's a really unique industry because oftentimes it's associated with being really boring or really complicated. And I think that challenge of trying to take something, first of all, that's not even tangible, right? People have investment products in their portfolio and they check their brokerage accounts and they can see that their brokerages are doing well or not doing well, but it's not really something that you can touch. So I thought it was really interesting challenge to create an agency around products that you don't necessarily touch or feel or see, but also working in such a highly regulated industry. So I think those constraints are really interesting and really challenging. And that's
Yeah.
how we derive our best ideas because we know compliance and legal won't let us say this. We know this is a really complicated theory to explain. What is the best way we can connect with the prospective investor and make a video or an infographic or a website or an ad
Yeah.
campaign, quote, go viral? So I always thought that was a really interesting challenge. So Arrow is a full service marketing and PR firm, as I mentioned. We help clients with anything from branding, visual identity, mission statements, marketing collateral, websites, social, videos, and public relations. And even though we offer a lot of different things, again, we're very focused on the asset management space. So we're constantly staying on top of compliance regulations. We're also obviously always staying on top of the newest things in SEO or the newest things in social media. And again, it's that combination of those two that keeps things really interesting. We've been really fortunate to work with small boutiques, small boutique investment firms, but also really large clients like NASDAQ, which has been awesome to work with. And it's through these different relationships and through these different partnerships that I think we can better hone our skills. So I think another plus of staying so niche is that we get a lot of referral business, but our team is always learning because we're so focused on a particular industry.
Yeah. And I actually wanted to dive into that a little bit more because a lot of people wouldn't take on this challenge, right? They wouldn't take on this challenge with so many regulations and compliance challenges. And so, how do you guys tailor your marketing and your public relations strategies to address the unique challenges and regulatory considerations of this industry?
Yeah, so I think the important thing to think about is I really view us as we're a creative agency, but we instead of being a creative agency that kind of works with anyone, I find that we are the creative peg in the spoke that is the asset management industry. I feel like we're very much part of that ecosystem. And as a result of that, we've really had to understand the business behind it. And I think, like any good agency owner, agency manager, you really have to understand the business of the industry that you're in to make the best recommendations and derive the best value for your clients, right? And so in being involved in higher level, like beyond marketing, but higher level business decisions, we've really had to learn what are the things that we're willing to push compliance on? What are the things that we understand compliance is not going to be in agreement with? So we've had to find a workaround. But I think the main thing is we've just had to really sit down and do the tedious labor of understanding what compliance is even asking us to do. So it could be anything for the listeners who are maybe not familiar with financial services as a business. It could be anything from just having disclosure requirements on the collateral that we create, but it could also be things like our clients can't talk about XYZ. So it's if they can't talk about XYZ, but their business goal is to get investors to understand something, how can we creatively reword that? Or what kind of images could we use to convey that? Because there are other images, such as like a piggy bank or a dollar sign or an image of a graph, with up arrows, that's a no from compliance. So it's, again, it's a really creative exercise of here are these literal icons that we cannot use. Here's this language we cannot use. There's a block of disclosure this big. How do we make this one pager really enticing and interesting when we have all of these restrictions? So the first thing is we really had to understand the language that compliance requires us to include. We've had to really understand the nuances and the regulations around these products so that we can make the best recommendations to our clients. So I always find that, especially when we're working with a new client, it's a lot of it is we're not just trying to make marketing recommendations, we're trying to make business recommendations. And marketing is just another way to express that.
Yeah. Wow. It's almost there's so many things you have to be aware of, and there's so many restrictions that you're like forced to innovate within this box. You know what I mean?
Exactly, exactly. I think the constraints make it really interesting. I think it's
Yeah.
in a way it might even be harder if, let's say, we represented makeup or something like that, or some other really consumer product that doesn't have
Mhm.
any regulations from a marketing standpoint. At least, obviously, they have formulaic restrictions and stuff like that they can't put in their actual products. But I think that's almost harder because that's a complete blank slate, and you really have to come up with something that's out of the box to wow the client. In our case, we are still trying to come up with stuff that gives that client that aha moment or wow, but we have these parameters that have to guide us because that's just the way regulations work. And finding that innovation in that gray space, I think, is super interesting. I know our creative director, who's been with us since day one, also talks about this. She could be doing marketing and design for any sort of industry, but the fact that she's so constrained is where her best ideas come out. And I always thought that was a really interesting point.
Wow. And I want to just shift gears for 1 second and talk about you specifically. Your experience spans roles from a VP of marketing at Global X Funds to founding Arrow. How have these diverse experiences influenced your approach to client services and agency growth?
Oh yeah, I can't overstate the importance of having worked at different places before launching an agency, right? It helps you, well, first of all, it helps you just learn about the industry on someone else's dime, but it also helps you figure out what are the expectations for this industry? What are the things that are considered successful in this industry? And so in terms of my background, I went to university. I did not study marketing. It was not offered at my school, but I always found it very interesting. And I took a class in college. It was literally one class as part of it was one day in a regular class. And we were learning about how different companies, multinationals like a L'Oreal or a Maybelline, how they market their beauty products to different types of consumers. So, for instance, the way they might market a mascara or an eyeliner in Asia would be different than what they would do in Europe, which would be different than what they would do in America. And I always just thought that was like really sociologically super, super interesting. But when I graduated college during the middle of the crash, none of those companies were hiring. But I did get a job on Wall Street. And so I tried to merge my reality of, well, this is where I found a job with the stuff that I was still really interested in. And I thought the intersection of the finance and the kind of creative world was super interesting. So I started off my career working at a B2B marketing agency that represented mostly consumer packaged goods clients. So no finance there. But I learned the basics of marketing, advertising, what it takes to do a campaign, what client service looks like, what the expectations of that are, because that is so much of our day-to-day role is doing the marketing, but also keeping the clients happy and satisfied, and how to deal with the crisis of clients not happy with something. I feel like that kind of learning is invaluable. That's on the job learning. That's not something you would ever learn in a class, right?
Uh,
So I did that. Then I actually switched gears and I moved into public relations at a finance focused firm. So I did PR for hedge funds, mutual funds, and other financial institutions. And there I furthered my understanding of how to deal with clients, but I was working in a very specific vertical, which was financial services. And I loved it. I honestly didn't think I was going to like it. And I really enjoyed it because at the end of the day, so much of finance is learning about the macroeconomic trends that are shaping our everyday lives. And it might not seem relevant, but so much of that kind of stuff trickles down. So, what the recent election, all of that trickles down to everyone's pocketbooks. Inflation, that trickles down to everybody's pocketbooks. And so, there's a lot more connections there that are a lot more relevant than what you might see on CNBC or in some really academic white paper about an investment idea. So, I thought that was really interesting. And then from there, I moved in-house at an investment firm. So I was their in-house VP of marketing and PR. And that's when, for anyone who's worked in-house versus agency, so I had gotten the agency experience at my previous two places. And then when I worked in-house is when I really got to sink my teeth into the products that I was representing and
Yeah.
learning about the compliance side of everything and working alongside sales
Mhm.
and legal and operations. And that's when I got really deep into the ecosystem, as I like to say.
Yeah.
So when I launched Arrow, I was really fortunate to have not only have these different experiences, but having both the in-house and the client side, and then the agency side to come up with an offering that I thought would be really compelling for my industry.
Yeah, I love that approach. And I love more so how you approach your career. It's so interesting that you had this, everything led to you launching Arrow. You know what I mean? And I think the big thing, especially for my generation, has been like, hey, either go to college or don't go to college, but go and start your own business. But there's just so much value to learning on somebody else's dime and learning the ins and outs of an industry and everything. It's such invaluable experience that if you can do it, you should.
Absolutely. And I would even say, and I'm a full proponent of work from home or work remotely, whatever it's called. My advice to anyone who's listening, who's maybe trying to get a career in the world of marketing or PR or communications, if possible, do try to work in person. Do try to work at an office or in person, wherever that office might be, because I think what you learn, the water cooler talk, the non-spoken stuff that you learned from people who are veterans in your space who happen to work at these companies, it cannot be overstated. And I'm fortunate that I was able to have that experience and then launch my agency and then turn it into something remote, which has been awesome. But I wouldn't be where I am today if I didn't work in the trenches, in an office, and pick up on all of the conversations. And that's my piece of advice for anyone who's starting out is working from home is great, but if you're really trying to learn a career and learn an industry, do try to work in an office for a little bit at least.
I love that advice. That's awesome. So, Arrow emphasizes building solid relationships with the financial press. What strategies do you guys employ to foster and maintain these relationships, and how do they benefit your clients?
Yeah. So what's so interesting about PR is the what we call like the triangle relationship. So it's we're the agency, we have reporters that we have to satisfy, and we have our clients that we have to satisfy. And what is so unique about that relationship is that we're trying to find an outcome that benefits everybody. So as the agency, we want to continue to grow, we want to make our clients happy so they keep coming to us. For reporters, these reporters, especially in finance, financial news moves really fast nowadays, but financial news moves really fast and has very heavy implications for shareholders. And so you have to understand the publishing side of things a little bit. Post 2008, when everything went from print to digital, a lot of these financial reporters had to file many stories a day to keep up with their publishers' demands for selling ads, right? And so, which is something that I think you guys know about. So, the financial media has changed a lot in the last 15 years, but it's important to know that these reporters have to file a lot of different stories. They don't necessarily do the really in-depth investigative work that they used to do from a time constraint standpoint, although there are some reporters that certainly still do that. So our goal at the end of the day is to make our reporter contacts' lives easier by bringing them story ideas, by bringing them sources that speak to what's already happening in the news cycle. So for instance, we're going to a reporter at the Wall Street Journal that covers the markets. Right around election time, we know that they were covering the election. So we wanted to bring them our clients who can speak intelligently about how investors should position their portfolios for the election, or maybe a nuanced opinion, or maybe even a controversial opinion, right? We're trying to bring these reporters good content so that they can do a better job. So that's how we satisfy our reporter relationships. And then for the client, of course, we're just trying to bring them really good quality media opportunities.
Yeah.
And so it's understanding this dynamic of this triangle where there's no currency exchange. Clients pay us a retainer, sure, but we don't pay reporters to write stories. Reporters don't pay the clients to quote them. So it's a really interesting exchange of the currency that's being used is not the dollar, it's the
Yeah.
currency of information. And so understanding that sort of trifecta is really important. Fostering those relationships with reporters is really important. And the main way we do that is we've been in business for a long time. So there's a lot of reporters we've just known naturally, organically over the years. But if we're trying to make inroads with a new reporter, for instance, we want to make sure that we're very on top of what they're writing about. We want to make sure that we really understand the audience that they write for, not just the publication, but the specific audience that they write for. And we want to have a really good understanding of what kind of stories are they generally writing? Are they opinion pieces? Are they fact-based pieces? Are there pieces that are getting updated every hour because the markets are moving so quickly? So again, a lot of the time our PR team spends is monitoring the news cycle and being news junkies, but also taking a closer look under the microscope to make sure that the reporters that we're reaching out to, we're bringing them stories that are relevant. In our many conversations with reporters, we're always being told that their biggest pet peeve is being pitched something that is completely irrelevant to their beat or to their coverage, right? So it's really important for us to understand what that is so that we can bring them the best sources going forward. And I think it's through that and pitching them story ideas and pitching them a controversial or a nuanced opinion or a take on something. Another way to do that is say, "Hi, so and so. I saw this article that you wrote. I think it'd be really interesting to throw in an additional opinion that might give you a different angle. Would you like to speak to our client so and so?" So
Wow.
I think it's just them seeing that we put a lot of time into
Yeah.
following them.
Yeah, and there's so much value in that because it's really hard to have somebody internally that does that sort of thing. You guys are
Yeah.
really bringing that value in from it's just that outside perspective, which I think a lot of companies really need. It's hard to do that when you're from the inside of the company trying to think about situations like that and bringing in
I th
relationships.
Yeah, I think so too. Again, as somebody who's worked on the agency side with multiple clients and who's worked in-house, I think I loved working in-house and I got to go really deep on specific products and like I said, work with so many different departments at the company to learn even more about the industry. But the downside of that is that you're looking at the same thing every single day and having an outside firm that can say, "We tried this with this client," or "We here's another take on this." I think having that outside perspective is invaluable. And I think a lot more firms really need to think about the benefits of that because there are obviously benefits of having somebody in house, but there are so many benefits to the agency relationship because that agency should be bringing with them not just whatever the scope of work and the mandate is, but their years of experience leading up to that. That's really what you're paying for.
Yeah, wow, I love that. Now, I was doing a little bit of research, Alexandra, and you've got fluency in multiple languages. You have a background in international relations, and you're an avid traveler who's visited over 40 countries. How do you leverage this global perspective to enhance your clients' marketing and public relations efforts?
So, well, whenever I'm traveling to some really remote country, if there's a business or a firm that I'm trying to pitch that I could get in front of, I find that super cool. I went to Romania and Japan years ago, and I was able to meet up with local firms there and pitch my offerings and services, which I thought was just such a really cool thing to be like from a bucket list standpoint, just like
Yeah,
such a really cool thing to do and really learn about what are the local nuanced problems that they're dealing with
yeah,
in, for instance, getting investors to put money into something. So what I learned when I went to visit this client in Romania is Romanians are really adverse to investing in the stock market because of Romania's history, and
yeah.
they're very non-trusting of the government. So what are some strategies that we could use to make people trust these investment products more? And again, very interesting merging of local culture, history, language, and the current kind of investment landscape. So I've been fortunate enough to take some unique meetings all around the world about that. And in terms of what it brings to our everyday job and how that enhances client value, I think it's when we're pitching different ideas. A lot of our clients will launch products internationally, not always, but when they do, we can speak to the American landscape, but we can speak to the global landscape as well. So if we have a client who's listed a product on the New York Stock Exchange for American investors, but wants to cross list, which basically means also launch it for the European exchanges or for the British exchanges, for instance, we can make recommendations on different publications that they might want to get quoted in or different webinars that they might want to be involved in because we have that global perspective. So it's been both personally, but very professionally rewarding to be able to do that.
Wow, that's awesome. And I'm very jealous that you went to Japan. That's next on my list. I've heard
Oh,
amazing
you got to
things.
go. Oh, yes, absolutely.
Yeah. Well, Alexandra, this has been awesome. When I hear you speak, I hear somebody who's very good at what she does, and I'm sure your agency stands to that. I know you guys won awards and everything. And so this has been a wonderful episode. Where can people learn more about you and where can people learn more about your agency?
Yes, well, thank you so much for having me. This has been awesome. If you want to learn more about our agency, check out our website, which has case studies and examples, both of our digital design and PR work. And the website is arrocom.com. That's AROCOMM.com. And for anyone who's interested in learning more, having a consultation, I invite you to shoot me an email directly. It's alevis, Alevis at arrowcom.com.
I will have everything linked in the show notes below. Thank you again so much for being on, Alexandra.
Thanks, Shiv. Appreciate it.